The final act of Rhythm of War, the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive, is perhaps the single most consequential part in Sanderson's published works to date. We see significant development of the magic systems prevalent on Roshar, along with meaningful events for key characters. Before we continue, this video will include spoilers through the entirety of Rhythm of War, and we will look ahead to Stormlight 5. So if you have not read Rhythm of War, we highly recommend that you catch up, then come back to check out the discussion after this intro. In today's video, we will discuss El, who we meet at the end of the book, as well as the agreement to a contest of champions between Dalinar and Odium. The stakes for this are quite high, but with Dalinar and Odium negotiating for an extended conversation, we have unpacked the key points that you need to know. There's a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Let's start with what we can gather on El. We know very little of El so far, but his introduction this late in the story and his zealousness for Odium seem to increase the future importance of this character. The inclusion of his musings as epigraphs for the final part of Rhythm of War make it all but certain. We have no references to El prior to Rhythm of War, but he is first mentioned in the text of the in-world book Rhythm of War, the experiment notebook created by Raboniel and Navani. Raboniel writes that the Rhythm of War, the combined rhythm and pure tones of Honor and Odium, has an emotional effect that El would be very interested in. Though Navani theorizes in the undertext that this is not a fused because there is no title, we see that she is incorrect at the end of the book. The first time he is seen on page is through the point of view of Lezian, the pursuer, who returns from Braze only a day after Kaladin kills him for the second time. El is effused with horns, and he removes his carapace upon each rebirth to replace it with metal. El does this by using void light to heal the metal into his body, but also with some other special abilities we don't yet know about. Lezian sees him standing looking out a window, holding a knife of the same type Raboniel and Navani were able to create a short time ago. While the pursuer is angry and frustrated following his loss to Kaladin, he forces himself to remain calm and respectful in front of El, suggesting that El is volatile or impatient with others. El relays to Lezian, now dubbed the Defeated One due to his failures, that Odium specifically brought him back to be an appropriate subject. El uses the anti-void light knife on the Defeated One, causing his soul to tear itself apart, proving the practicality of the weapon. We learn more about El's mentality through the final 19 epigraphs of the book. We'll go through the epigraphs in order, which can be combined into a letter to Odium. Obviously, this first one is an ominous prediction by El, but it only tells us he is confident in his side's chances in the war. He was stripped of his title, along with his rhythms, because he dared to suggest that humans not be annihilated. Moesh now holds his title, Fire, or He Who Quiets. It is theorized that El is the fused new name, simply meaning he or him, now that he has no title. El has recognized that humans are very good vessels and conduits for emotion, so much so that emotion spren constantly surround them. He thinks this should be utilized, not wasted. The fused play heavily in human mythologies on Roshar, even if some of the more recent histories have long forgotten the truths of the nature of the Voidbringers and Desolations. El admires much about humans as they continuously struggle and contradict their nature in beautiful ways, including the process of broken people becoming Knights Radiant through their bonds with Spren. He is glad that the war between humans and singers has come to a stalemate, including some groups of humans guaranteed to be under Odium's forces after the contest of champions. We'll get to that in a little bit. El describes a larger war, which must be external to Roshar, as he suggests Roshar will be united, with him leading a large force of humans. He again posits that the humans should not be tossed aside or annihilated, and that he will rule over them. El finally references Taravangian as the new Odium, and with El being so adoring of the humans, he is extremely excited to follow a Rosharan human as his god. The final snippet of information on El that we learn from the fourth book is that he is the author of the book Ketek. The book Ketek is the poem that makes up the book's part titles, which has been true for each of the major Stormlight books. Burdens, Our Calling, Songs of Home, A Knowledge. Knowing a home of songs, called Our Burden. El apparently wrote this Katek in honor of the sibling being restored. We also see that El is a scholar on human art forms, which somewhat describes his adoration we discussed in his Musings. But this doesn't follow the Kateks we've seen from humans, which generally have a symmetrical construction around a center word. This is a little different, as it is truly symmetrical with no center word, and emphasizes the final line instead of the center of the poem. So while El is emulating the human poetry structure, he is also showing his bias towards singer customs. It seems it's safe to say that while El may love the humans for what they are, he will still place them lower than the singers of Roshar. El wrote his musings on the first of the final 10 days. With Dalinar and Odium making an agreement to have a contest of champions, the date is set for 10 days from the final day portrayed in the Rhythm of War. The two willing champions will meet atop the Tower of Urithiru at the 10th hour on the 10th day of the current month, Pala. It's unclear whether this notation of the first of the final 10 days is optimism on El's part, or if it is going to turn out to be a truth of history recorded by a scribe after the contest. In the meantime, Dalinar has sent Kaladin to Shinovar along with Szeth to help Ishar recover from his madness. Dalinar hopes that Ishar can teach him to use his powers as a bondsmith to their fullest. It is unclear what else may go on during this brief 2-week period, or when the contest will occur within the 5th book, as it will certainly have major ramifications our characters will have to deal with. This is a contest to the death, but it is a duel with more at stake than just the lives of the champions. Dalinar declares that he will be his own champion, but Odium's champion is unknown. The god originally wanted Dalinar as his champion, but Dalinar defied him at the Battle of Thalen Field. Odium then attempted to use Moash to gain Kaladin as his champion, but the pursuer poked the White Spine just before Kaladin broke, and Kaladin was finally able to swear the 4th Windrunner ideal. Odium is currently without a named candidate, though he says he knows who he will choose. There are several theories, but considering Reyes is no longer the vessel of Odium, Taravangian's choice may be different. Moash has recently been blinded by Navani, and it is unclear how or if he will recover. He does not seem like a likely champion candidate unless Odium is able to grant him an extra ability in these last days. El is mostly unknown except for his personality that we reviewed moments ago, but he is on the shortlist because of his recent introduction and relevance to the 10 days until the contest. Nael has previously chosen to follow Odium in his attempt to return the land of Roshar to its rightful owners, the Singers. A herald would be a daunting champion for Dalinar to face, especially one of the 5th Skybreaker ideal. While there's a small possibility that another herald gone insane, like Ishar, could be brought in, we haven't seen another herald side with Odium like Nael. Aside from these individuals, it is difficult to identify other candidates. It is unlikely to be a character we have not yet explored as of the ending of Rhythm of War. There are other theories suggesting a child like Gavinor or Oridon will be Odium's champion, or perhaps another Kholin such as Adolin, including ties to the Death Rattles. But these theories mostly forget that the champion needs to be a willing candidate. In any case, if for some reason a child or Adolin were willing to fight for Odium, the theory is that Dalinar would be unwilling to kill them, breaking the terms of the agreement. After a protracted negotiation, the terms are set. The two champions are not to be hindered in any way by either side to ensure a proper contest. If Dalinar's champion wins, Alethkar and Herdaz are returned to the coalition, a ceasefire is formed, and Odium is bound to the Rosharan system. Keeping Odium bound to Roshar is an important part of the plan, which Wit ensured would be written into the agreement. If Odium's champion wins, he keeps the lands that he's won, which includes most of eastern Roshar. He is still bound to the system, and the ceasefire is upheld. But Odium has an extra term. Should he win, Dalinar will become a fused, Odium's servant, immortal, to do his bidding. There are also rules for the agreement not explicitly listed in the terms. The terms of the agreement are to be held to the spirit of the words, not the exact wording to avoid loopholes. If either breaks the agreement, even in spirit, the other will have control of them. There are additional consequences for breaking their word. Odium would be vulnerable to cultivation due to the weakness in his soul the betrayal would cause. Dalinar, as Honor's proxy, would negate the previous limitations on Odium, allowing him to leave the system to the wider Cosmere. Odium would also be able to use his powers on most people, which he is currently incapable of doing. Clearly, there is a lot riding on the contest, and there are plenty of guardrails to ensure the contest is held without complication. But in some of Taravangian's first moments as Odium, he examines the agreement and finds possibilities that he can defeat Dalinar, saying he has set himself up to fail. Considering the final part of the first of the final 10 days, there is a high likelihood that Dalinar does not succeed, bringing uncertainty to Roshar and beyond. One final note to bring up is that L says that Lezian was brought back so quickly after death because Odium decided to make an exception to the previous Odium, Ray's, was no longer performing. Taravangian, as the new Odium, was willing to bring Lezian back using the old way, the way before the storms. This is a mechanic that we do not fully understand yet as of Rhythm of War, but it seems Odium is able to return the fused at will, without the Everstorm, now that the Oath Pact is defunct. It's possible we see this more moving forward, though it is possible this is how the desolations of old were started once the Oath Pact was temporarily broken, when a herald gave in to the torture. With L mentioning that this was the method used before the storms, as in plural storms, both Everstorm and High Storm, it's possible the High Storm was only created after Honor died, or at least wasn't always a cornerstone of life on Roshar. What we see of Odium's interactions with the Fuse moving forward relies heavily on the outcome of the Contest of Champions, set for 10 days after the end of Rhythm of War. L and Odium are aware of a greater war beyond Roshar, and it is their goal to bring as great a force to that fight as possible. We will have to read more to find out whether Dalinar is a part of that force. So what are your thoughts on L and the Contest of Champions? Who will be Odium's champion? How will the contest end and who is victorious? Post a comment below. If you've watched all of our Wind and Truth prep series, you're ready for the conclusion of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. So let's read and find out where the journey takes us next. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe for future videos. After all, we need to unarchive all these secrets.